Minority Caucus chose to host him tonight because we believe his story and outlook best represents what Nana Addo meant when he says in the first Liberty lecture that, and I'm quoting, the freedom to aspire, the opportunity and the chance to live a rounded, dignified life as part of a society in which, for everyone, there is a place for choice and talent to flourish. It is normal for every individual to aspire to have a decent education, a decent job, a decent home, and to live in an atmosphere of security, law, and order, unquote. According to Nana, realizing our aspirations depends on the quality of the education that prepares us, which to a large extent, therefore, is a mindset issue. So then, do we have the mental toughness as Ghanaians to meet the challenges of finding a nationalist development path in a multipolar world of global interdependency? Tonight, we are into mind games, creative thinking. At least in a sub-Saharan African case, appears to be a bad idea. You know, can you imagine? Thinking becoming a bad idea. Charles. At best, you have lamentations of nationalism seen to be on the fringe, whilst you have reasoned internal critique that is pushed with some delicacy to avoid being pigeonholed. If you are too strident, they may say you belong to that faction or the other. So even when you have something to say, you avoid saying too strongly. In a book, Setting Straight the Record of Ghana's Recent Political Past, this is Professor S.K.B. Asante. He chronicles the adventures of Kobna, scion of a distinguished Cape Coast family, educated in England, nationalist, who chose to risk his background and future prospects, fighting the colonial master through the Aborigines Rights Protection Society. And this is what Kobna is said to have said, and I want to quote Kobna. Tonight's Aspirations, Mind Games. Kobna says, and I'm quoting him, society was an organism, living, growing, developing, evolving, unquote. Quote, it evolves healthily only if it reacted to the stimuli from its changing environment. Having said that, he then goes on to say, we cannot expect to get into the way of continuous development while we are following a system of education which depends on the borrowing of an alien physiology, psychology, and sociology. A system of education which is based upon eschewing by us of the social institutions of our ancestors, on the ground merely that our ancestors were uncivilized, for just as a condition of health in the individual is health in the society in which he is born, so a condition of self-respect in the individual is reverence for the institutions of his social grouping, unquote. I also want to read along the same lines, and that is why we are doing mind games tonight. I happen to have gone onto the net and read Nyaba Awiba Azongo. Never met him. I understand he's the creator of the Smido project in Swami magazine, and he's on the net. My Joy Online, it was online yesterday. And he argues that we don't need a development plan. What we lack is a development path. And that once we have a development path, which ought to be based on our innate institutional evolution, based on appropriate education, then we can begin to think of planning within that context. Then he says something very damning about our intellectual situation. He says, Ghana and by extension African economies have been major dropouts in the existing economic development philosophy espoused by the West and loyally retailed in Africa by her scholars. The constant reference and fetishism of shallow economic indicators and Western applied economic theories as development finalities has only served to expose our unquestioned intellectual subservience to questionable external development standards. This has been a sore point in our quest to string forth a mass-based development trajectory. All that the long Brofo is saying is that our development cannot depend on pursuing single-digit inflation and GDP growth. We must begin to look at what really is involved in our development. And that's why we fast forward to the State of the Ghana Economy Report and the mid-year review released last Friday. Two brilliant Ghanaian economists, Doctors Robert Osei and Felix Asante of ISE, have cautiously cautioned that even as we say we are growing, and now I'm going to quote Osei, we need to cut down on our borrowing or risk leaving behind an unthinkable amount of debt for the young ones of today to pay tomorrow. Then he continues, even though the economy is growing at a very fast rate, 14.4%, the amount of debt we owe to both local and foreign institutions and other countries can lead us back to HIPC status. Then Asante says, even though the economy has experienced tremendous growth over the last 2.5 decades, it has not reflected in the citizens' standard of living. The development experience of the last 2.5 decades has shown consistent economic growth, averaging 5.4% from 1984 to 2010. Although this growth rate has not been as high as planned, the consistency of it has led to a reduction of poverty over the period. Yet, it has not reflected in the citizens' standard of living. Charles, you are the development advocate, nationalist. Tonight, Minority Caucus is asking questions. 1, do we have the right attitudes to aspire successfully as a nation? 2, are we brought up to be a quiescent and unquestioning people, intellectually intolerant of new thinking? Are we getting to the stage where we are worshipping personalities, cults of personalities, so that once it is said or once you follow somebody, you do not have a right to dissent, disagree, project? Are we risk-averse Ghanaians? Are we afraid to fail, Charles? Do we cover it all with false modesty? Or to say, oh, nyamia drum. You know how the Americans assess the Ghanaian character in WikiLeaks? Live and let live. If you don't touch it, it will go away. And therefore, the conclusion of that assessment was that it would be easy for external terrorists to penetrate us. I said that properly, they don't bother because they won't find much. You know. What about PhD? Pull him down. On the one hand, we are earning it in the classroom. On the other hand, we are physically doing it. MBA. Everybody wants to earn an MBA. And you go into an office and it's Mebaha Ache. You can't dislodge me because Mebaha Ache. And this is the way we've been doing it over the years. Charles, do we have a way forward?
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a way forward. And that way forward is nowhere else but in ourselves. Unfortunately, we seem to be looking everywhere else but ourselves for solutions. And that is where I think I want to start with. Yeah, also, I'd like to, and which is normal and natural of me, to present things or strip the language down for everybody to understand.
Excellent.
I think that's one of our major problems here. Our academics are not able to strip the language down so that everybody else will understand. So that's what I do, and that's how we can carry everybody along. Gone are the days, for a long time in this nation, we have focused on a few people in terms of our development, a few people. But it's now time for us to focus on the large mass majority. Very important. Some of them you watch since their champion days to now, they have not really made any progress. They seem to have been caught up in a trap. And they don't seem to have anybody telling them or inspiring them as to how to get out of it. The steps to get out of it, the type of education, etc., which I'm going to break down today. Now, yeah, let's start. It all starts with our mind, with the mind. In the past, yeah, the world was measured, or success was measured in terms of physical force and strength. That is how we had dictators. That is why we had, even in families, the man walks into the house and even his sweetheart's wife freezes right away.
Strong men.
That's it. The man speaks, the woman doesn't speak. The man speaks, the child doesn't speak. I'm sure you're familiar with Opini Kasa, Akoran Kasa.
Yes.
And what has that done to us over time? A deep-seated inferiority complex, lack of confidence, unable to express ourselves. But meanwhile, every human being as God created us was made to progress, was made to desire a certain liberty to be able to aspire, to be able to develop, to be able to move forward, to be able to compete with others. That's how God created us. So there's a natural, because God says he created us in his image and likeness. God is a visionary. He's a progressive thinker. He's a strategic thinker. He's a planner. He's an organizer. Okay? God works with times and seasons. So there are times to be slow. There are times you want to be fast. Now, there are times, seasons, and eras on this earth in which we all have to operate. There was a time, once upon a time, that was called the 16th century, or the time that Jesus Christ operated. He moved with donkeys, and they trekked. AD 11. Today, just with a click of a click of a button on your mobile phone, seconds, somebody in America has got a text message. Today, you can be in Kukantumi, Wa, Ho, or in the smallest village, which hasn't even got electricity, provided you have a mobile phone that is charged, maybe through solar or whatever. You can know what Obama is going to eat for lunch because you get on the net, you see it there. That's the world we live in today. Now, having understood that, in the past, Tony Blair could sit in England and just create, just send ships down to Africa or to Ghana, come and transact, colonize people, take them away. These days, Tony Blair does not have to come to Africa. Tony Blair sits down because he uses the mind now. The mind is a new game right now. Yeah. So we're in a game-changing business now. In the 21st century, the game is the mind. The mind is supposed to produce ideas. Ideas build nations and build societies and build big businesses. Ideas are what bring about change. And so that could only happen when you develop the mind. I'll come to that. So now Tony Blair sits down and then does what? Creates a concept, because it's about concept development now. Yeah. So he creates a concept, okay, of how he realizes that Atomills need some money. Atomills is very desperate because there's so much pressure out here from opposition forces, from the citizens themselves. All of us, you know, we're in a hurry. I remember once I was speaking to President Kufuor when he was president then, and he says, "Nipa ni pentam so, nipa ni pentam,
nipa ni pentam."
Pentam, that's right, which is true, because yes, we are 400 years behind developed nations in reality. Okay, so people want to catch up. They are seeing these things on TV, they are traveling, they are reading books, they are looking on the internet, and they are seeing, hey, some people have done it. What is wrong? We must be able to do it as well. Now, where do the chips really fall? Leadership is the first thing. Leadership